This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome to this week's Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. This is a show about innovation, creativity, and design. This week, we're actually doing the show live from Sunnyvale, California, so we're not in the studio in Colorado. And so for some of you, you may get used to have been watching us on Facebook Live. Today, we are not able to do that, but we are streaming the show on Zoom, so you can hop on over. The benefit is if you join us live, you get to see things you can't really see on radio. So today, I'm actually broadcasting live from what we call the MEL Lab, or the Media Experience Lab here in Sunnyvale. So if you're into tech, gadgets, and gear, I'm actually putting out a broad enough video shot where you actually, if you hunt around, you'll see some prototype technologies and products, including emotive EEG devices. We have a bunch of virtual reality headsets here, some drones hanging around. You never know what you might see if you hop on over and watch the show live on our video feeds. And we again thank Zoom for supporting the show by providing the Zoom technology that allows us to stream this live each and every Sunday that we're in, wherever we're at, even if we're remote. So today we're going to have a little bit of a different topic. We tend to talk a lot about gadgets and widgets and shiny things, and we talk a lot about early stage startups. But one of the areas that I know, particularly for residents in the U.S., but it's also a global issue, is the challenges around healthcare and what's really happening. And are there really opportunities to think differently, to really innovate the way we think about the challenges and opportunities, really, in healthcare systems? Here in the U.S., it's turned into a hot potato debate in politics that's gotten pretty politicized. This show is not about politics. We talk really about how do we become a catalyst to change? How do we become a catalyst to transform? So today's guest is Dr. Stephen Klasko. Stephen is the president and CEO for Philadelphia-based Thomas Jefferson University and Jefferson Health. And he's both a doctor and he's an MD and has an MBA, and has been part of some of those transformations, both at the point of what Thomas Jefferson University's been doing in Philadelphia to transform itself to be a catalyst for change, but also has recently put out a book and has been out there really as a voice for others to think differently about what does it really mean to transform that healthcare. So, Stephen, thanks a lot. I really appreciate you joining the show today.
It's great to be on Killer Innovations, and healthcare is something that really needs to be innovated.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. Let's maybe lay a little bit of the framework. I mean, I think everybody has an opinion on, our own experience or family experience in healthcare, and that kind of becomes our rallying cry. But I think there's probably, some more fundamental issues as far as some of the challenges. So, it is that kind of this common debate, but I think many people are just kind of throwing the towel in that there's just no way to change it. Is there something really that can be done for healthcare to really innovate, transform that healthcare system?
Well, some of it is exactly what you said. I think patients have sort of given up on healthcare joining the consumer revolution. And we need to figure out how to do that. I'll give you one real live example. If you have a parent in a cancer center, you're still in 2016 calling up your mom and saying, "Mom, what did the doctor say?" And she says, "Well, the doctor came in at 5:30 in the morning. I have no idea what he said." We started something called Virtual Round. We partnered with a company called Blue Jean Software, where when somebody comes in, they say, "Oh, I have a son in Denver, a daughter in Miami." The moment we make rounds, we text them. They're part of that round. Now, on the one hand, that's pretty cool. On the other hand, we could have done that 3 years ago with FaceTime, 5 years ago with Skype, or 15 years ago on the phone. So some of this is patients have not demanded, but they absolutely demand in every other part of their life.
Well, is it really? I mean, this is also a situation where, in the innovation game, customers, in this case, patients, aren't sometimes really the best sources for those kinds of ideas, right? And in your case, you're taking a little bit of a different kind of twist to it in the fact that you're trying through some of your other affiliations. I'll let you describe it because I'm sure I'm not going to get it right. Where people who are taking kind of non-traditional pre-med courses get early admission to become doctors because you're trying to transform kind of that thinking process, that thinking style coming into the healthcare systems.
Right. So the first premise is that we are doing a great job training doctors prepared for the 80s and 90s. So if you think about it, we still accept students based on science GPA, MedCats, which is a multiple choice test, and memorizing organic formulas. And somehow we're amazed that doctors aren't more empathetic, communicative. As my kids would say, duh. So we started the first medical school in the country where we actually chose students based on emotional intelligence. Because there's 100% chance that there's no human brain that will be able to memorize every genomic formula, and that there will be an IBM Watson next to me that's better at memorizing organic chemistry. So why test me as that being the sole thing? So literally, we're actually looking for folks that are self-aware and have a lot of empathy. One of the programs you're talking about is something we're doing with Princeton University, where we take students from their design program, smartest kids on the planet, and they're majoring in anthropology, they're majoring in architecture, they want to be physicians. We automatically admit them. So they start their sophomore year. They go through the whole of Princeton, but they have to take different kind of courses, and they don't have to take the MedCats, because just being able to pass a multiple choice test is not what it's all about. We've also had every one of our medical students take a minor, and the most popular minor has been in design. And in fact, we just merged with a design university, which was formerly Philadelphia College of Textiles and Sciences, which is number 10 design university in the world.
Well, that's interesting. Why do you think that the most popular minor is design?
Because I think what our students are recognizing that we've done a really lousy job of designing the experience for patients. And I think millennials recognize that design is not just, what shirt am I wearing? Design is really how do you engineer the human experience, right? That's what almost everything we've done in travel and shopping and everything else has been, except in healthcare. So they're really excited about working with architects and engineers and others around how can we fundamentally disrupt the way that patients and doctors and hospitals interact. They love it.
So, but I mean, it's like any other large organization, right? You're graduating these students that are, have a different background than the traditional doctors that are being graduated and going out and working for hospital systems. Are the hospital systems, are those organizations ready to adapt? Or is it, in our world, and in the tech world, we refer to that as the innovation antibodies. You bring in these people who are the real forward thinkers, and then people who've been around for a really long time are the ones that are trying to squash that new, fresh, ideas. Are the health systems really ready for this transformation?
I think some are, some aren't. I think we're probably one of the more innovative ones. That we're 192 years old. When I got to Jefferson, we acted our age, and I wanted to be, really the first top 25 academic medical center that's really acting like a startup company. I will tell you that more and more places are recognizing they need to do that. We call it sort of going from Blockbuster to Netflix. And the reason I really like that analogy is because Blockbuster always assumed it was about the stores. Reed Hastings recognized it was about the entertainment. And if I can get the entertainment out to where people are, that's going to be better. If it's their mailbox, if they're too lazy to go to the mailbox, we'll put it on the TV. Pretty soon we'll be too lazy to put it on our TV. We'll have a little Netflix chip in our brain. We recognize our product is care and caring. And we're working to get that out to people's homes through telehealth, through urgent care. I'm no longer a hospital company. I'm a consumer healthcare company.
And what's the difference? Give me the quick definition of I can tell you're using the words very specifically.
A hospital company is, I'm here for when you're really, really, really sick, come into my hospital and I'll treat you okay. A consumer healthcare company is, I am your partner in every medium you currently use to keep you well. If you're a little sick, if you're moderately sick, or if you're really sick, and you can access me 24/7 in the way that you access other things that you do in the consumer world.
And obviously, that part of that then is taking advantage of the technologies that consumers have in their pockets, correct?
huge IS&T operations, partnering with places like IBM Watson, partnering with folks that are startup companies, Kleiner Perkins, taking our 3 million patient encounters and going to a new IT startup company and saying, we're here for you.
Perfect. Hey, we're going to take a quick commercial break here. We'll be right back. We're going to pick up this conversation with Stephen Klasko, who is the CEO for Thomas Jefferson University and Jefferson Health, talking about really what's needed to transform the healthcare system. How do you bring innovation to healthcare? And how does that start all the way back to even the students that are coming into the program? So stay right there. We're going to be right back. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
BizTalkRadio.com.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. This is your host, Phil McKinney, a show about creativity, innovation, and design. Today, as our guest, we have Stephen Klasko. Stephen is both a medical doctor and an MBA. I don't know if that's such a unique combination or not. Kind of makes it an interesting conversation. For Thomas Jefferson University and Jefferson Health out of Philadelphia. Stephen's written a book. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. But in the first segment, we were talking about, is there really an opportunity to transform the healthcare systems? Now, Stephen, one of the things I know you're also involved in is really about how do you bring entrepreneurship to the whole healthcare system? And that includes things like you actually have an accelerator program with Thomas Jefferson. You're kind of into everything now with university healthcare systems and now an accelerator.
So we have something called JAZZ, Jefferson Accelerator Zone. And we actually have jazz tanks, like Shark Tanks, where we take entrepreneurs and we have panels, we give them grants. We just had a hackathon talking about drones and wearables. So here's a 192-year-old venerable healthcare organization with, as you know, 23-year-olds coming around the country with a lot of pizza and Red Bull for 36 hours talking about drones and wearables. And we actually partnered with the insurer in Pennsylvania to give very large grants to have them take that software to the next level around wearables, around drones, and around reducing readmissions for things like congestive heart failure.
And so what happens? So they go through the accelerator program, then you select winners and they get these grants. Do they go back home? Is it a residential accelerator like a Techstar or something?
One of the great things about doing it out of a health science center, because we have 3 million patient encounters, if you come up with a neat app or a neat idea, it's not hard to find places to test it out. That's usually if you just come from the Silicon Valley part of the world, now you have to find a healthcare place to do it.
Right.
We actually, our whole concept of Jefferson, if you will, starting up health is that we're going to be available for new ideas.
Well, and I think it also helps when you've got a CEO who's willing to say yes, versus a lot of organizations with someone comes in with the new idea, the answer is no until you convince me for it to be yes.
I mean, I'll give you an example. We started something called the Institute for Emerging Health Professions. And, it came out of when I was working at Apple at iTunes U Health. They were always about what's going to be obvious 10 years from now we can start doing today. So we said, what are going to be some of the jobs needed in a transformed healthcare that we can start today? So we're starting certificate and master programs in augmented intelligence, in things like community engagement, National Telehealth Academy. We just last week started the Cannabis Medical Education and Research certificate program. We're starting a master's in cyber, what we call cyber insecurity, because there is no such thing as cybersecurity. So the fact is, what are some of the things that are going to be important 10 years from now? We're a university. Let's do them today.
Well, so you brought it up, like, the artificial intelligence, augmented intelligence. Talk a little bit about what you're What's your thinking there as far as that opportunity in healthcare?
So I think that we have to get over ourselves. You know, this whole art versus science of medicine is important. And I think this whole, a robot's not going to replace me is right. But here's the point. There will be, and I gave the keynote for IBM Truven Health Analytics the other day. There will absolutely be something like an IBM Watson next to me that's going to be better at memorizing and telling the patient what her genetic anomalies are. It will never be able to read between the lines or communicate with the patient a different way. Just real quick story. I've delivered 1,800 babies. I've watched good obstetricians when you deliver, God forbid, a Down syndrome baby unscheduled. What does this mean, doctor? Start talking about the 21st chromosome or talk about the pulmonary fibrosis. I've watched great doctors understand what does this mean, means what does it mean to my image of a perfect baby, and go in that direction. So the point is that we do need that augmented intelligence so that we can do the human part that creates a complete doctor. And that's where we're going to get to. So I was at a panel with John Doerr and the person Cosmo who runs Google X out in JP Morgan Health, and we talked about that. And people were saying, well, John, what do you think about artificial intelligence in health? And he said, nope, it's really going to be augmented intelligence, but that allows people like me to change the doctors we choose.
Interesting. That is. I mean, my wife is a nurse. She's a neonatal intensive care nurse, has been a neonatal nurse, master's degree, 25 years. And, she's been the one, she's seen, the story you just gave, given that she's in these deliveries, these high-risk deliveries, and the differences between the human element of that versus the factual element of that. So I can't even imagine how impactful that's going to be on the industry.
And so, Phil, we now take our applicants to an art museum and ask them to tell us what they see. And if all they can do is tell us what's physically there and they can't tell the story, I don't want them to be a doctor. Because at the end of the day, my whole job is to be able to observe versus just see what's there. Half the kids that we admit can't see anything beyond their nose, but they can memorize formulas really well. Again, there's a machine that's going to be able to better do it better than any of us.
Wow. So you were going through the long list of kind of these jobs of the future that you think are going to be needed in healthcare. Give us one more example.
So I think one of the ones that I'm most excited about is literally what we're calling directors of global health. So we've now partnered with Bernie Marcus, the founder of Home Depot, gave us a large grant to create a Center for Integrative Health. Think about this. Everything in our world is global, right? Entrepreneurship is global. Finance is global, except in health. If you do it in China or you do it in India, that's alternative health. So when I was in India for 3 or 4 weeks, if I hurt my back and I wanted pills, I had to go to an alley. I'm going to get acupuncture and Ayurvedic medicine in their universities. Here, that's alternative. So we're actually creating a Center for Integrative Health where we're teaching our folks certificates in traditional African medicine or traditional Indian medicine, and really combining that with traditional American medicine instead of saying it's an either or, it's now a both and.
Yeah, well, we just had a comment pop up in the webinar here that pointed out the same thing that I was thinking, which is wow, because it's really not about the process of medicine. It's really about health and healing.
Well, it is. I mean, we've totally lost that. I wrote one article, From Marcus Welby to House, how did we get there, right? Yeah. Marcus Welby was the ultimate empathetic physician. House is a very smart, drug-addicted, maybe sex-addicted, narcissistic robot.
Yep.
So it is about helping.
Perfect. We're going to take another quick commercial break. This is a great conversation. You do not want to go anywhere. Stay right where you're at. When we come back, we're going to pick this up with Stephen Klasko from Thomas Jefferson University, Thomas Jefferson Health System, continuing the conversation about innovating the healthcare system. So stay right there. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
BizTalkRadio.com This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. Before we jump back into the show, I need to take just a minute here and thank our sponsor. Now, if you've been a long-time listener to the show, you probably are saying, now hold on here, Phil. You've been doing this show for 12 years and you've never had a sponsor, and you'd be absolutely correct. This is a first time. But I'll explain more in a minute. A common ask that I get from listeners and those that are you that are really focusing on how to take that idea and go off and create just an absolute killer or breakthrough innovation is, how do you find the top talent? How do you find those individuals that can really help you take that idea and do something magical with it? Now, like you, I've tried many of those outsourcing sites, posted up projects, hired some people through those, but the output has just always been disappointing. Our sponsor is TopTal, and TopTal is different. For starters, they screen every technical and design expert that applies, and not just on technical skills. They also screen on communication, they screen on personality, and they really play that matchmaker role. The result is only 3% of those that apply get accepted, and you're guaranteed that every person working on your project is on the A team. Companies using TopTal range from large companies like Pfizer and JP Morgan down to startups like Airbnb and Zendesk. And for listeners of Killer Innovations, you can try TopTal at zero risk. Start a project, and if within the first 2 weeks you aren't convinced that they're absolutely killing it, you get 100% of your money back. Plus, you get to keep the deliverables. So hop on over to toptal.com/Phil to start your project. Or better yet, drop me a note at phil@killerinnovations.com, and I'll make a personal introduction to make sure you get the VIP treatment. So, why am I allowing TopTal to sponsor this episode? Well, first, my mission is to equip you with the knowledge, skills, and also the tools to take your idea and make it a reality. And you've got to have access to top talent. And I like TopTal. I've checked them out. I've met with the CEO. I've met with their team. I've met with their customers. And I've also talked with their technical talent. They're all top-notch. Now, second, taking on a sponsor helps cover the cost of producing the show. I've been funding the show myself for 12 years. And by accepting a sponsorship, it actually allows me to put more of my funds into my nonprofits, which are hackingautism.org and pioneer.education. So this isn't about making money. 100% of the monies we receive, including 100% of the author royalties for my book, go to the charities. So what are you waiting for? As I've said 1,000 times before, ideas without execution are a hobby, and true innovators are not in the hobby business. So go over to toptal.com/Phil, start your project, or drop me a note, and I'll make that personal introduction for you. And make sure that TopTal does give you that true VIP treatment. And besides, who doesn't like a little extra TLC? So let's return back to the show here. We were talking before the break really on this whole issue of augmented intelligence. And it does come across really as being something that could be totally disrupted. And Stephen, you and I were talking during the commercial break really about this. You know, when you are delivering something that is totally disruptive, that there is some pain in the process. You don't get anything for free. There's some cost associated with that.
Right. So and again, we won't get into politics, but there was a guy in the 60s, a guy named Bill Kissick, that talked about an iron triangle in healthcare of cost, access, and quality. If you remember your geometry, if you increase one angle, you got to increase another. So if you're going to increase access, you either have to increase cost or decrease quality. If you want to increase quality, you either have to increase cost or decrease access. What he said is, unless you want to fundamentally transform and disrupt the system. So what he said in the 60s is, if anybody ever tries to tell you we're going to increase access, decrease cost, and increase quality, and don't worry, it won't hurt a bit, not happening. And that's a little bit of what happened in 2010. So when President Obama or anybody says every civilized country has total access to the right, but there's no civilized country that has a 20-to-1 difference between their top paid specialists and the lowest paid specialists. There's no civilized country that has total access that doesn't deal with end-of-life issues. There's no civilized country that doesn't deal with some of the pharma issues we have here. So at the end of the day, we haven't wanted to do anything that makes anybody upset. We don't want to upset the doctors. We don't want to upset pharma. We don't want to upset patients. But don't worry, we're going to provide this inefficient expensive health care for everybody. So miraculously, it's costing a lot more than we thought. So the answer is we're at the reform stage. We're going to the transformation stage. We will win when we get to the disruption stage. Not everybody will be happy about it, but we'll have an efficient healthcare system.
I like that point though on the fact that there is this process. It's like everyone wants to jump to the transformation, but it actually does require the change. If you looked at, without getting into the politics, right, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, but when you think about the transformation of the healthcare system in the U.S., what are the roadblocks that you see currently in really disrupting the healthcare system?
I think one thing is it's way too hospital-based, and I run 11 hospitals. It's funny to say that, but the fact of the matter is, part of my book that we'll talk about in a minute is A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Healthcare Galaxy. Right? And the concept is, believe it or not, Phil, there is a country in a planet in the Milky Way where there are state fairs that sell corn dogs and funnel cakes that are sponsored by hospitals with cardiovascular surgery departments. Right? Does that make a lot of sense? Believe it or not, at a time when we know we're going to need 25% less hospital beds, and healthcare is going to go out to people, there are hospitals building new hospital beds. So the problem is people don't take transformation or disruption seriously. They say, oh, that's nice. All right, so President Obama just increased access for everybody. How can I make that good for me? I'm a dermatologist or I'm the head of a pharma company. I'm going to figure out how I make that good for me. Not how do I fundamentally change the way I do business.
So if you're saying the hospitals are in that we're too hospital oriented, then what's the alternative model then?
Well, I think we're going to need less hospital beds. I mean, simply put, we're going to need less hospital beds. In many joint replacements, right? A lot of people, my age get joint replacements. In 2 years, that's going to be an outpatient procedure. In some hospitals, that's 30% of their hospital beds. So instead of saying, well, gosh, I'm going to ignore that, or maybe I'll be retired by then, we have to deal with it. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
That means we'll actually be, hospital beds are expensive. I started a telehealth program, getting 60% of my non-trauma, non-ambulance patients out of my expensive ER. Now today, I get paid less because I did that. The people that are still getting all their patients in their expensive, inefficient ER are getting paid more. So that's the part where we haven't disrupted yet. We said, oh, I get a little gold star for taking it out of my ER, but I make less money from providing better care.
So it's not just the fact that you got to transform, that the hospital, the thought process around the hospital systems, but it's also the whole payer model that goes along with that then.
Exactly. I mean, there are I won't mention names, but there are academic medical centers in this country that for the same procedure get 9 times more from the payer or from the government than the community hospital across the street without having to prove better outcomes. That's a good gig if you can get it, right? I mean, so if you think about it, if you had a product and you were somebody else was paying for it and you were able to get 9 times more for it, and you didn't have to prove that you were a better product. So we don't exist in a market economy is the bottom line. And I believe we will. And at Jefferson, we're getting prepared for that.
So the challenge, though, is organizations like yourself, though, you're taking the arrows being in the front, meaning you're doing the right thing, but in effect get penalized because the other part of the systems haven't caught up to the new model yet.
There's no question about it. We're in the twilight zone of healthcare. I mean, I have some of my colleagues going, I'm glad Klasko is moving 60% of his patients out of expensive, inefficient ER. I make a lot of money having people.
Oh, we just lost our video feed with Stephen. We'll bring that back in a second. Hold on here a second, Stephen. You just came back. For some reason, your video locked up there. You were just talking about your colleagues telling you they were glad that you were moving all those people to telehealth.
Yeah, because they make a lot of money having people come to their ER. I believe that the Affordable Care Act started a tsunami. It's going to lead us to a very different healthcare, and that we'll be rewarded that way, like any other innovators look at.
Yeah, so that's great. So we're going to be right back. I want to pick up on this topic, but I also want to we're going to jump in, talk a little bit about Stephen's book, and really have the conversation about, the premise of the book really is also that means to kind of paint the story of what the future for healthcare really could be and what those disruptions, impacts are going to be. So stay right there. We're going to be right back continuing this conversation with Stephen. You're listening to Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network, and we'll be right back after we get a few bills paid with some of our sponsors.
BizTalkRadio.com.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. Picking up our conversation with Dr. Stephen Klasko. Stephen is the CEO for Thomas Jefferson University and Jefferson Health Systems in Philadelphia. Let's talk a little bit about your book, Stephen. So your new book is "We Can Fix Healthcare in America," which is a very provocative title given the topics and discussions here in the U.S. with regards to healthcare. But as part of that, you describe 12 disruptors, really, of the demise of the old healthcare system. Now we can't go through all 12, but maybe you can pick out a couple of them that you think really are representative of those disruptors.
Yeah. So first of all, the original title of the book was "I Messed Up Healthcare in America. Put Your Name Here." The concept being that everybody blames everybody else for what's wrong, and it got changed because the publisher wanted to have a more positive message and put an American flag in front so we could sell it at Walmart. But at the end of the day, the concept is that President Obama gives it one last shot. Gets everybody in a room, CEOs of pharma, CEOs of health systems, people like yourself, doctors, lawyers, congressmen, senators, and says, fix this. And we all blame each other. And then there's an alien invasion, a science fiction event, a blackout, and a vapor. And all we can do is look in the mirror. And out of those 3 days comes the 12 disruptors for the demise of the old healthcare that are so powerful that both the Republicans and Democrats use it for their healthcare platform. Democrats call it dramatically different democratic discourse for healthcare. Republicans call it, rather than repeal, let's reimagine a Republican revolution healthcare. So it's things like, but they're remarkably similar. So for example, take the volume incentive out of the payment system and put incentives in place that are aligned with optimal health outcomes. That sounds like it makes sense, right?
Yeah, pretty logical.
The difference is, the Democratic platform is, the federal government will accelerate the shift to paying for fee-for-service to paying for value to a population. Our goal is to keep people well and prevent expensive and difficult care. The federal government will do that. Republicans is the federal government will work with private insurers to create incentives for good health, exercise, and diet, core components of a healthy lifestyle. Remarkably similar, still has the government needs to do it versus work with the private sector. But at the end of the day, all 12 of these, believe it or not, could be put to the test and would be approved, I believe, by both Secretary Clinton and Mr. Trump. It might be paid for differently, but instead of arguing about what we don't agree on, and instead of having a fantasy of what could happen, this book actually posits, the first chapter is called 2016, when politics and healthcare became fun again, which is not exactly what people would say in this universe, but in the alternate universe it did.
So do you think that there's a middle, it's just to say middle ground. You're positing that there's enough overlap to actually disrupt the healthcare system.
I don't think there's any question about it. I actually was involved with some of the decisions that were made around the Affordable Care Act. And again, if it hadn't gone through the sausage factory, a lot of things could have happened that would have made us much better off in 2016. I think, let me give you one live example. I'm a pilot. I have a private pilot's license. Every 2 years, I have to get my technical competence assessed. I also do surgery. You want to guess the last time anybody checked my technical competence objectively? 30 years ago. There's a 62-year-old doctor in this country that has had their technical competence assessed in the last 30 or 32 years. So we actually created some metrics with some simulation companies, and it ranged from Stryker Covidien to Lockheed Martin around how we can start to check if somebody is technically competent. Those are the kind of things that we should all agree on. Because if you're doing robotic surgery, there's all these billboards. Come to my hospital because we got a robot. That's great. What about the human at the other end of the robot? I'd like to know that he or she is competent in using the robot. We don't talk about that. I guarantee I could get both the Democrats and Republicans to agree on that. I guarantee we'd save billions every year in undergoing the learning curve. You talk to any doctor and say, how do you learn that procedure? We say, see one, do one, teach one. That's great unless you're the one on the other end of the table. Simulation and better ways to do it.
Right. Yeah, in fact, years ago when my wife was doing some camp nursing up in Minnesota, and I happened to be in the area, and I was doing a meeting at Mayo. I took my wife over to watch the surgical simulations at Mayo. They have these just phenomenal, like 8 surgical suites where they go through, and doctors, before they're allowed to ever touch a live patient, have to pass a certain amount of testing with things like the robots and that on these simulation dummies. It's pretty impressive.
Your wife is neonatologist. I learned how to intubate a 1.5-pound baby in the middle of a chaotic delivery room with the husband over me. And the distance between the trachea and the esophagus and a 1.5-pound baby is almost mind-bogglingly small. Now, we don't let anybody do them at our place until they prove they can do it on these really amazing simulators. These kids are 1.5 pounds. They cry, they pee, they do everything that normal babies would do. But we don't let them do it until they prove they have the technical skills. We should do that with everything. We had the co-pilot of the guy that landed the U.S. Air thing in the Hudson. He said, what you guys do in medicine would be like me trying out a new Airbus for the first time with 280 people on it and say, well, let me see how this puppy flies. I don't think we would do that in aviation.
Right. Well, that is an interesting point. And it's interesting from the standpoint that everybody's busy digging their ditches on which side of the alley you're on versus, the real issue is how do we transform both improving the healthcare system while at the same time, reducing cost and extending reach to cover the people who are underserved or non-served today in society.
Right, so the 12 disruptors are called disruptors because the 12 of those would require better access, better quality at a lower cost. Now, people that were doing 3 MRIs or 5 ultrasounds per patient that only need to do 1, they'd make less money. But at the end of the day, the overall health system would be significantly better. It doesn't matter who's the president.
Hey, Stephen, as we wrap up here for the show, if people want to follow what you're doing, what's the best way they can find you?
They can get on www.12disruptors.com, disruptors.com, or www.sklasko.com, SKLASKO.com.
And I'll put all those in the show notes. You can hop over to killinnovations.com and pick those up. Stephen, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your Sunday to spend some time educating us on the technical side of the innovation curve about the opportunities to innovate within healthcare. I appreciate everything you do. Everybody, we'll talk to you next week here at Kill Innovations. Don't let the antibodies get you down. Keep on innovating. Bye-bye.
The opinions you hear on Biz Talk Radio are those of the hosts, callers, and guests, and do not necessarily reflect those of this station, Biz Talk Radio, its management, or advertisers. The information on Biz Talk Radio does not constitute a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any product or service. If you have any questions about Biz Talk Radio, contact us at 817-274-1609 or at biztalkradio.com. biztalkradio.com.